Hello, this is the Promotory channel. Today we'll break it down. This engine here is the D245, an inline 4-cylinder turbocharged diesel. I'll add the technical specifications as subtitles right now. Here they are. So specifically this engine was taken from a Pavlov bus factory bus. It's the extended version, the one with 2 passenger doors. Basically, this is an engine from Soviet times, from the middle of the last century Soviet times. In the mid-1980s, they added a turbocharger to it, the combustion chamber, and it became the D245. So during Soviet times, it was the D240. So they're trying to modernize them. In the 80s, they installed a turbocharger. Now we have them with a common rail system. There's Euro 2, Euro 3, Euro 3, basically. It's still the same old D240E, but they're trying to modernize it somehow. Someone is trying to do something with it. But in my opinion, it doesn't get any better. It's not better than it was in the 240 version. I don't think it gets any better. It just causes more headaches, more problems. That's my personal opinion. Also, this engine has another issue. It's not very easy to repair. I mean, we do have spare parts. Well, you can repair it, but the problem is that the quality of the spare parts is really lacking. So I think that at the factory, whatever gets rejected, they send it to the stores and sell it as spare parts. I've personally come across this situation. We bought a new unit and immediately took it out for testing. When we checked the bearings, the cover wasn't original, the diameter was wrong. Plus there was no alignment and we had to bore out the new unit and restore the crankshaft bearings. And only after that did we assemble it. And it seemed like everything was working more or less fine. But that's just an example of a big part, like the main unit. You could say this applies to absolutely everything. Whatever you touch, almost all the parts are of this quality. So, in my opinion, if this engine lasted as long as it did from the factory, and it's better not to bother yourself or others, but just get a new engine right away, install it and use it for some time, rather than repairing your old engine every year or a year and a half. Well, that's just my personal opinion. So what exactly happened to this engine? I mean, is it unclear what happened to it? There are odd noises, poor performance, and shaking at times. Let's treat this as a scheduled repair. We'll take it apart, inspect, and replace what's needed. I'll start disassembling now. Oh, and I also want to mention that there should be a turbocharger here. The turbocharger is still on the bus, so they removed the manifold. And the turbocharger is still there. This is a turbocharged engine. We'll take it apart and inspect it. Basically, as usual, we disassemble, check for defects, clean everything, buy the parts, and put it back together. They brought it to me with the frame. So the first thing I'm doing now is removing the frame, taking it off the mounts, disconnecting the frame, and then I'll start disassembling. So I'm taking off all these filters, hoses, the compressor here, basically everything on top, and then I'll start disassembling the engine itself. That's it, let's go. So I removed the frame, disconnected the ground, put it on the table, made some supports, put in the old sleeve and a piece of wood, and now the engine is standing steadily. So now I'm removing the tubes, hoses, covers, basically all the attachments. Let's go to be continued. Yeah, right, I'll remove the fuel pump, right? So I disconnected the oil supply to the pump. T3 times imaged in both. Now I need to unscrew the oil supply fitting. Imaged in, there's another bolt behind it. Next, I unscrew these two bolts, which are the additional mounts for the pump. Remove the gear plug 3 bolts, and then I unscrew the 3 studs that hold the fuel pump drive and remove the fuel injection pump. To be continued. To be continued. Alright, that's it. I've removed the pump, and as you can see, I've taken out the pump, but the fuel pump drive gear is still under the cover. That means it will come off when we remove this front cover. Alright, now I'm taking off the valve cover, the injectors and the cylinder head. So I removed the injectors this way, and as we can see, they were taken out recently. Something was already done with them, and that's why they came out so easily. Usually, if the injectors have been in place for a long time, you have to set up a puller and remove them with it. But now we see that the injectors came out very easily. I think there are actually new injectors installed here. Next, I need to remove the heat exchanger filter pump and water pump from this side as well, and then lay the engine on its side so I can loosen the cylinder head bolts. To be continued. So basically I've removed all the attachments, just need to take this one off as well. Now I'm laying the engine on its side, because in this position it's impossible to unscrew the cylinder head, the force is too great. So I lay the engine on its side, unscrew the bolts and remove the cylinder head. So I've laid it on its side like this, braced it here so it doesn't wobble, and now I'm unscrewing the head. So we can see there's buildup on the fourth cylinder. That means we can see it wasn't working. Everything's covered in oil, it's wet, and you can see there's buildup here. Something was hitting the piston against the head. That's where the knocking sound came from. We found that, but we haven't found the cause yet. What are these pieces and where are they from? Maybe it's a seat that crumbled. We'll need to take out the valves now. Check the seat. The valves, well, maybe the piston got welded. In general, we won't guess. Now, we'll look for the cause. So now let's look at the piston. We see there are also some pieces on the piston. Here, the shiny ones. So, let's look at the cylinder liner itself. There are also scratches on the liner, like grooves. You can feel them very well with your finger, so they're deep. So, we can see on this side, the liner is actually burnt here. There's a real pit. I'll record it on my phone now. It'll focus better, and you'll see it more clearly. So let's look at this fourth cylinder. We can see there are some marks on the piston, like something was hammered in, and there are still some pieces left there. We can see that on the liner there's a pit like this. It's as if the liner itself was burning, which is strange. Usually it's the piston that burns, and on the opposite side there's a similar pit, but it's smaller. So I could also assume that it was the pin that came out, but that's unlikely because the pin would leave this kind of wear. Maybe it's somehow related to the injector, or I also have a theory that the ring broke apart. If you look here, there's a gap between the cylinder liner and piston, indicating the piston is burning at this spot. I'm not sure, but it's likely both the piston and cylinder liner are burned. We'll remove the piston and check, and maybe this is somehow related to the injector. We see that our injectors are new, so maybe one of the injectors was supplying fuel incorrectly. And all over the cylinder liner, right here on the walls, there are scratches. You can hardly see them on camera, but you can feel them by touch. A cylinder that's in good condition looks like this. Everything is fine. And we can also see the condition of the block after this gasket as well. Everything is perfect. So we'll take it apart and see what's going on with the fourth cylinder. We'll check the piston, the valves, and inspect the injector. Alright, next what I'm going to do is turn the engine over and set it down on this surface. I'll put some cardboard underneath so it doesn't get scratched. I've got the guides to hold it, but I'll add something underneath just in case. I'll be removing the cover, the clutch, the flywheel, taking off the oil pan, the pulley and the cover. Basically, I'll be taking everything apart completely. So I've removed the oil pan, and here at the bottom in the pan we can see fine shavings and pieces like this. I assume these are the partitions from the piston where the piston rings are installed. These partitions have crumbled. Next, I'm removing the oil pump, the pulley, the front cover and the rear cover. So apparently the pump sucked in these metal shavings and now it spins, but you can feel it's getting stuck. I won't even bother taking the pump apart. I'll just order a new one. Alright, so I removed the clutch basket and the flywheel. Now, I'm going to take off this cover here, which has the oil seal, and then I'll unscrew and remove the housing itself. There's also a spacer in the back here that also holds the oil seal. So actually this system is from the 1950s. Alright, I'm unscrewing everything here by hand, because all this dust from the clutch gets lifted into the air when you work with compressed air, so I'm using a hand ratchet. This is how the fuel pump drive gear is removed. So when installing it, you just need to align it with the mark and tighten it. By the way, its teeth are broken, so it needs to be replaced. If its teeth are broken, we should check for other damage too. Yes, that's right. The intermediate gear also has a broken tooth. And by the way, here on the crankshaft, the teeth are broken too. So all the gears are damaged. We'll have to take a look now, maybe even replace everything. Because once a tooth broke on one, it affected the rest. Here we have the intermediate gear, the camshaft, the crankshaft, the injection pump, and they all have to be set in one position. So we can see that the shaft here has gotten loose. The shaft was spinning. So let's take a look at the cover as well. We can see that right here. Something has rubbed against it. You can see the shine, which shouldn't be there. So something has rubbed here by this shaft which holds this intermediate gear. And if we look at it like this, we can see how much play it has. So this shaft itself is removable. It gets inserted and pressed in there. And apparently it's gotten worn out right in the block. So this can't be restored anymore. The block needs to be replaced. The shaft started to have play. The shaft started to move. Accordingly, this gear here is wobbling and it's breaking the teeth on all three gears that it meshes with. Well, of course, I'll take it apart again and have a look. But in my opinion, this block can't be restored anymore. We'll have to install a new one. Alright, let's keep taking it apart. So I still need to take out the pistons, sleeves and crankshaft. Now I'll lay the block on its side again so I can unscrew the main rods and take out the pistons. Okay. So we can see that there were metal shavings in the oil system, apparently from the burnt piston. And we can also see that our bearings have started to score as well. Most likely the crankshaft was also damaged. We'll check it out. For now I'll take out the first cylinder and see. Everything should be fine there. Then I'll take out the fourth cylinder and we'll see what happened there. So we can see that this spot here looks like the ring is broken, and this area looks like it was melted with a torch. So it's very strange. It turns out that because of a faulty injector, the injector wasn't spraying properly. We had too large a spray pattern, maybe even from just one hole, and as a result, the liner and piston burned through like this. So I knocked out the pin and we can see that it's just broken in half right now. It's very hard to tell what happened first, whether the pin broke first, because it was crushed into pieces like this. It started to break the ring and those pieces began to scratch both the liner and the piston. Or maybe that's already a consequence, I don't know. I need to think about it for a bit. Right now I can't even come up with any options. So either this is the cause and that's the effect, or vice versa. That's the cause and this is the effect. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'll wipe it off a bit now and film it in more detail. The piston pin split in half. Not across, but lengthwise. Exactly lengthwise. This is how the pin split in half. So, what I think is that this was the reason, this indentation on the piston and on the cylinder liner. At first I thought it was burnt through because it looks very similar. When a piston burns through, it looks about the same. Anyone who has seen it knows. At first I thought it was burnt through, but of course I'll check the injector on the test bench to make sure 100%. that it's not leaking and that it's working properly. But still, after looking at the piston and the piston pin, I still came to the conclusion that this is what we have here. The reason we are on the piston pin, that's the reason it started knocking there. It started shaving off metal, shavings from the bushing, shavings from the piston itself. And so, for example, these little pieces, the way it got polished, this could be a piece of the pin itself. It just ended up in this spot, and as the piston moves back and forth, it works. So, with these little pieces, both the piston and the cylinder liner get worn out. Here are some examples. This is not a one-time thing. It was there. You can see how it got worn down. It became like a sea pebble. It kept rolling around in there, getting polished in those spots. Here's the second point. We don't have a through hole from the combustion chamber. If this was a burnt through piston, then this groove would go into the combustion chamber so that gases could get in and keep making their way through. But here we see that, on the contrary, there's a thickening in this spot. So it packed in these shavings, and that was the cause. I assembled this engine, I think, in 2018, so it's been 2 years. We have this kind of sleeve, this kind of sleeve, this kind of sleeve, this kind of sleeve. I'll also check what kind of piston assembly it is, which manufacturer, and most likely the piston pin was defective, meaning it broke under load. So, as I said, the problem with these engines is the spare parts, the quality of the parts you can buy in the store. So, the piston pin had some defects. It broke under load, and we can see what happened. So the situation with this engine turns out to be quite interesting for us. So the piston group definitely needs to be completely replaced. Piston sleeves, one connecting rod needs to be replaced, and the cylinder block also needs to be replaced because the axle was damaged in this spot. Maybe it's somehow related, I don't know how yet, but maybe it's connected somehow. If we look at the bearings, we can see this kind of damage. There are already scuff marks here, and on this bearing you can see that metal shavings have built up, but it hasn't started to score yet, although there's a lot of metal shavings. Maybe the shavings also started sticking to the thrust washer here, and the gear started to jam. Here we have the oil channel right in this spot, and there's also a drilling on this shaft itself. Here they are, the oil gets in here and it comes out here. Right here it comes out, and this gear rests against this washer. This washer here is the thrust washer, so because of the helical gear, it pushes it in this direction onto this washer. So possibly these metal shavings also started getting in here, and this washer started to seize up, started to weld itself, and maybe the gear also started to seize onto the shaft. So I think all of this happened because of the metal shavings. That's what happened here. Accordingly, now this mounting spot for the pin for this axle is worn out. I have no idea how to restore it. I don't even know, and honestly I don't want to know. So the engine block is also going to be scrapped, and the crankshaft is questionable because there's wear on it. We need to take it out and check it now. Ground crankshafts on these engines apparently don't last. So if we have to grind this crankshaft, it means it won't be suitable for us either. All that's left from the engine is the cylinder head, and we don't know its condition. We'll need to disassemble and inspect it as well. Maybe we need to work on these two valves. I think there shouldn't be any issues with the rest. And then there are all these covers, oil pans and gears, which all need to be replaced too, because all the gears are broken. So we only have the cylinder head, the covers, the camshaft, E, and 3 connecting rods left, E. Everything else is going to be thrown away. So let's see what decision will be made. It's a pity I'm not the one making the decision. I would just take a shovel and throw all of this scrap metal out the window right now. I can't stand these engines, unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately. I'm not the one making the decision, so we'll have to wait. First, we need to take it apart, then explain the whole situation, our guesses and thoughts about it, and then we'll see what decision will be made. Alright, for now let's take out 2 more pistons and remove the crankshaft. I removed the crankshaft. It's still dirty since I haven't wiped it yet, but we'll look at it later. Wipe the bearings for now, and we can see that every bearing has scoring marks. The metal shavings from that pin went through the oil system, and we can see scoring on every bearing, some of them even very deep. This might have been the reason why the intermediate gear failed as well. That sticky aluminum shavings got packed under it too. It got jammed in there, pressed in, and the shaft started spinning in the block, began to seize up, and the shaft started spinning in the block. I'm almost sure about 90%, maybe even more. So, this is what our connecting rod bearings look like. This is what our main bearings look like. Here are our main bearings in the cylinder block. So, our workday is almost over now. Tomorrow, I'll take out the sleeves, take out the lifters. Basically, tomorrow I'll finish up with the block here. And I want to find out who the manufacturer of these pistons is, who made this piston assembly, meaning it was a complete set piston sleeve, piston, rings and pin. I want to find out right now who this manufacturer is, so we can give them some good publicity. This is what the piston looks like after cleaning. So as we can see, there are some markings here. We see the word start, some other symbol, and we see the manufacturing date September 18. As I mentioned, I rebuilt this engine 2 years ago. You can see the made in Russia marking here. We see a QR code, but I tried to scan it. The camera doesn't pick up this QR code. Apparently, it's a bit damaged. There are no other markings, so I couldn't find out which company made this piston assembly anywhere else. You could have found out from the QR code, but the camera can't read it anymore. So let's take a look. We can even see a crack on the cylinder sleeve here. So right here you can see, yeah, what a groove there is. And on the opposite side we see a crack. And I saw something else on the cylinder sleeve somewhere. Here the music is also a sign. Here it is. I'll take a picture with my phone now and insert the photo. Music. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean anything to me. Some manufacturer, but maybe someone knows. If you do, write it in the comments. Music. Alright, that's it then. My engine is completely disassembled, only the bare block is left. Well, I still haven't knocked out the camshaft bushings yet, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. What I'm trying to say, as I mentioned before, is that a lot of parts need to be replaced. The block, the pistons, the crankshaft is still in question. I haven't checked it yet, by the way. But that's not such a big deal anymore right now. At the moment, all the gears need to be replaced. They all broke, so we need to replace this shaft. Basically, we're left with the cylinder head, the covers and the camshaft. So, in my opinion, the best thing to do with this engine would be to scrap it for metal and keep the good parts for the future. Or maybe even get a new engine for this bus. That's just my personal opinion. That's what I would do if it were my vehicle, and so on. But I don't know yet what decision will be made. So, maybe there will be a repair. Maybe a new engine block will be bought, new pistons and so on. I don't know yet what the decision will be. Because, as I already said, the quality of the spare parts leaves much to be desired, and after assembly. There is no guarantee that, say, in half a year or a year, something similar won't happen again, which in fact happens quite often with these engines. So basically, I don't like these engines at all, and this might even be one of my least favorite engines, if not my absolute least favorite. I tried to recall if I'd ever seen a pin break apart like this, splitting lengthwise. And in 23 years of working with engines, with all kinds of them, I don't think I've ever seen this. For a pin to crack lengthwise like that, I'll keep this pin in the archive. I've seen a lot of things happen to engines, by the way. I've seen connecting rods break through blocks, crankshafts snap, and rods twisted into knots. I even took this part out of my archive. I've kept this little piece for about 15 years now. Of course, I could hold a contest and ask where this is from. What is it? And so on. Well, I'll tell you now. This is a piece of a Mercedes crankshaft. So, you can imagine what happened to the engine if pieces like this were flying around like shrapnel, as if a grenade exploded inside. This is the main journal here. And here, if you can see, in this spot the shaft was ground, but it was ground incorrectly. There was a sharp 90-degree step here. It happened about 15 years ago and left a piece like this. This pin of mine will also go into the archive now. I'll clean it up too, let's say as part of my archive of interesting cases. And now this pin will also go into that same collection. So let me also say that I'm 100% sure that this pin was the reason the engine failed. And specifically a defect pin, meaning it's a factory defect, it worked for a while, handled the load for some time, and then at one point it just simply broke. And actually it's probably hard to hear that kind of sound because this engine itself is very noisy, it runs loudly. Those who have dealt with it know. So if this pin hadn't fallen apart, this engine would still be running. Well, I don't know for how long it would have kept running, but judging by everything else, basically everything was more or less okay. The only reason it failed is exactly this defective piston pin. Few words, I'll tell you how things are, what decisions were made, and so on. So this is an absolutely new block. I'll be assembling on it. It's a new block. We'll get back to it in a moment, and I'll tell you more about it. Here we have the block. It's broken. This is the place where the shaft for the intermediate gear is installed, and this block is made of metal. Next, we had another car. It had exactly the same engine, recently rebuilt. It had only run about 20,000 kilometers, so the mileage is low. As for the time, I'm not sure. Maybe I rebuilt it about 6 months ago, something like that. But what problem does it have? So the engine was rebuilt, everything was installed, new pistons, bearings, and so on. But what problem does it have? When the first frost came, as we can see, it froze and then thawed. So in this spot, a crack like this appeared. They tried to weld it right there. As we can see, they welded it, smeared something on it, and patched it up. But as we can see, the coolant is still leaking here. So it didn't give any results. Here we can see the crack from the inside. It goes like this, like that. So it's a pretty big crack. So it turns out this didn't give any results. So we ended up with an engine that had good internals, but a bad block. That block is for scrap, and this block is for scrap too. We took out this engine and I disassembled it. So my task now is to take everything from this block, absolutely everything, and transfer it to this new block. That's what the repair will be about. We won't use any new parts here. Everything will come from the thawed out block. The only thing that was purchased was a set of gaskets and a set of main bearings, since the crankshaft was also new. And I think right here on this journal on the shaft itself, there seems to be a small scratch in the area where the oil channel runs. Apparently the chamfer wasn't done well, but we'll check everything and take care of it. So this block is new. It was brought in and it was all covered in grease. I put it in the washer, cleaned it, blew it out, so the block is already prepared. I've also partially cleaned some parts from that disassembled engine. I filmed a bit of this process, now I'm showing the footage. So, as I showed, I've already cleaned some things, some are still left, and now as we go, we'll be cleaning and assembling. So, our task now is to take the parts from the defrosted engine, wash them, clean them, and install them. We're not putting anything new on this block, just transferring everything over, that's all. So, this block was purchased for around, I don't know, 4,000, 50,000 rubles, I'm not exactly sure. Of course, I suggested buying a new engine, which would have been much more reasonable, much better. That's just my personal opinion. But the engine is very, very expensive. So that's why I'm putting everything together like this. I don't even know which bus this engine will be installed on, either on a bus from the Hello Domestic Manufacturer series or on a bus with a frozen engine. But basically, it doesn't really matter for our video. So now we're going to start assembling it first of all. Here we have a box with main bearings. And we also have this magic little bag with spare parts from this engine. So, since this is a domestic auto industry engine, a new block, we still need to finish some things ourselves and complete some parts ourselves. So in this little bag, we have guides. We see 4 guides, which means 2 for the rear cover, 2 for the front cover. For the front cover, we also have these plugs. Here is one plug. And here is the second one. We install them into this channel. Here we have the drilling for the oil channel. So we need to put a plug on this side, and we need to put a plug on this side as well. Also, before we used to have to install these nozzles ourselves. So here we have oil nozzles, if you can call them that, coming out of this channel. Here you can see one tube inside another tube, and it's directed somewhere towards the piston. Where exactly it sprays is hard to say, but basically it's aimed somewhere over there. Here we have one nozzle, here's the second one, and on this main journal we also have one here and another one here. Before, you had to install these tubes yourself, but now we can see they're already installed in the block. So this is clear progress for our domestic auto industry. I also forgot to mention that this engine was taken straight from the store to the machine shop. They put it on the machine, check the diameter of the main bearing seats, and also check the alignment. Well, basically they said that everything seems to be fine, but I'm almost sure that this engine won't work. Something will definitely happen to it, because it's a D245 assembled from spare parts. That's why I'm just sure that you want to do everything you can with them. It seems like everything was taken into account, everything, but still it doesn't last 100,000 and something always happens to it. But the shaft will break, the gasket will blow, the bearings will seize. I don't know why, the piston will burn through, the head will crack, anything can happen. So that's my attitude toward this engine. In general, everyone tried to anticipate as much as possible, did everything, checked everything that could be done basically, and still only in rare cases does this engine run and work well after repairs. In all other cases, something is bound to happen to it, and it always does, just as people say. But my favorite engine, well, I don't like working on them. Actually, the engine itself, the design, everything, I don't like anything about it. Before I start assembling, I need to install this axle, which fell out of the other engine. Install this axle and put in the guides at the front and back. So I'll take this axle from the old engine, the one that got frozen. So I made this kind of puller. Put on the flange, the washer from the same flange, screwed in 2 studs, and used nuts to pull the axle out toward myself. To be continued. I drove the axle in, but not all the way. Here it should be almost flush, but I left it sticking out a little just in case. When I install the gear, I'll need to adjust the depth to control the longitudinal movement of this intermediate gear. Next, I glued the plugs in place and also drove in the guides, but again, not all the way in. Then if needed, the cover will press them in deeper. On this side as well, I didn't push them all the way in. The plug is glued. Now I'll remove the main caps and try to set these tubes in a bit deeper. So I can see that it feels like this one could still go a little deeper. Next, I'll be installing the sleeves, putting in the camshaft, the front intermediate plate, and so on. Basically, we're starting the assembly. Continued. Alright, as I start the assembly, first I'm installing this intermediate cover. Subtitles are done, then I will put this gear, turn the block over and install the crankshaft. That's how much work has been done so far. Alright, I've installed the camshaft here. As you can see, there's a bolt for a screwdriver. So I'm tightening it with a valve screwdriver using a simple 14mm wrench here. Alright, I've installed the camshaft. Now we're setting the timing marks. Here are the timing marks. Next, I'll install this intermediate gear. It also has marks. This one is for the crankshaft, marked with a K. The camshaft is marked with an R, and T is for the fuel pump. So now, I'm aligning it with the camshaft, and the rest will fall into place later. If I set it now and start turning it, the marks will line up. Alright, I'll explain and show later how the marks move. First, I'm installing the washer, the gear, and tightening them with the bolts. That's it, the gear is set. There should be a bit of play so it can move back and forth. So, about the marks, I want to say that if I turn this gear one full rotation, these marks won't line up anymore. So as you can see, I made one full turn, brought the camshaft back, but the marks on the camshaft are off now, and so on. You can make a lot of turns. As you can see, I made another turn, and the marks still don't line up. Third turn, and again the marks don't line up. Fourth turn, and so on. I haven't counted the turns. You can keep turning it endlessly and the marks still won't align. That's why it actually makes sense to install it after the crankshaft, meaning you set the mark here, set the mark there, and then put it on. But I'll check it later, and if something goes off, I'll take it off and put it back on again. Now, I need to do 4 turns in the opposite direction. Now you can see my marks are aligned. Since it's intermediate, it shouldn't really matter. For example, when you've set everything up, turned it 2 times, and these marks don't align again, it doesn't matter anymore. The main thing is that initially all these timing phases were aligned. That's it. So now these gears are installed. Now I flip the block over and install the sleeves. The sleeves are also old. I cleaned them like this, especially the seating areas for the rubber seals, and now I'll install them and, first of all, measure the protrusion of the sleeve above the cylinder block. Here's what I did. I installed the sleeves in order: 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, without the rubber seals, and pressed them in. So regular sockets fit just fine. You don't necessarily need any special tools. Large sockets fit perfectly. And now I'm measuring the protrusion of the sleeve above the cylinder block. It should be between 0.05 and 0.11. I take my homemade tool, set it up on the block. We see that the block is at 0. We go to the sleeve and see 0.08. 0.08 at 0.08, we see that the block is at 0. The sleeve is 0.0. 0.007. Also, the block here is 0. The sleeve is 0.07. The second one is 0.08, 0.08, 0.07, 0, 0.07, then 0.07.8. 0.87. 0.78. So we see that all our sleeves have a protrusion of 7.8 already in the clamped state. This flange protrudes above the cylinder block by 7.8, which in principle is normal. So that's it. Now I remove these clamps, take out the sleeves, install the sleeves onto the rubber seals. So I'll be installing the sleeves onto these kinds of rubber seals. They're silicone, basically fine. The main thing is that they're not like these, not the black ones. The ones with these black, they usually come in gasket sets. Those are really bad. These ones are a bit better. So 2 rubber seals are installed in the block. 2 seals for each cylinder, and the sleeve itself is empty without any seals. Pistons. Mine are ready. I won't remove the rings. I won't measure anything. Everything is fine here. So what are my next steps? Next, I will lay the crankshaft into the block. I won't wash it so that these journals don't get rusty and I don't have to deal with that later. I just wiped it with a rag and blew it with compressed air. And now, as I said, I need to take a diamond stone like this diamond stone and go over it with this stone. So these oil channels, one of these channels has a small burr, so to speak, and it scratches the bearing shell, not badly, but the shell was scratched. So that's it. I laid the shaft, installed the bearing shells, applied assembly paste, and put the timing mark. So as you can see, my camshaft is aligned, and you can see the crankshaft here. We'll also have the fuel pump marked with the letter T. Next, I installed the main caps and tightened them. That's it, the crankshaft is installed and tightened. Next, I install the pistons. The piston rings and bearings will remain the old ones. I checked the piston pins, they seem to be fine. So I prepared the nuts and the tool. Now I'll take out the bearings and wipe both the bearing itself and the area under it. I also want to mention that my pistons are marked as first, second, third, and fourth, meaning the pistons. I'm installing them in order. The sleeves were also marked, and I installed the sleeves in order as well. So the pistons are installed and tightened, the crankshaft is fully set in place, the main bearings are tightened and the connecting rods are tightened. So next I'll be installing the cap. I've washed, cleaned and prepared the front and rear covers. First I install this gear, which is the oil pump drive. Then I install this shield. Not a dust shield, but an oil deflector. This is how it goes on. It protects the oil seal from oil. So, before putting on this gear and the oil deflector, I check the marks. As you can see, the camshaft lines up and the crankshaft lines up. Here I have the mark for the fuel pump. So I take the gear for the fuel pump drive and install it. Now I need to somehow secure it here. I place the rubber bands like this to create a tensioner, and as you can see, my marks are now aligned. Also, then we add another gear to the process. The power steering is also driven by a gear. And then we add another gear here. You can see these teeth. And here we also install the compressor. So from here we also have the compressor drive. So in this mechanism, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 gears involved. It's dynamic. So after we've installed the cover, I remove this rubber piece, and now this gear won't go anywhere and its tooth won't slip. So through this cover, the power steering pump and the fuel pump are mounted right away. I install them immediately so that everything is tightened with these bolts. Upbeat music. So I've installed the fuel injection pump like this. Here we have 2 mounting bolts and 2 long ones that go through the entire cover. So I've also connected the oil supply to the pump here. There's a channel here, and this is the oil supply for lubricating the pump. You don't need to set timing marks when installing the fuel injection pump. Well, as long as the gear is installed correctly, like I showed. We have 3 studs here, and you can't install it any other way. You can see that they're offset. Adjusting the engine timing either way only takes about 5 minutes. Now, I'm putting the cover with the bolt inside here, and then I'll install the rear casing. So I prepared the cover, the gasket, and the bolts. We can also see that the designers of this engine took care of the mechanics who will be assembling this engine, and they made this special little shelf so it's convenient to place the bolts. Dynamic. Alright, next we'll install the flywheel housing, but first we need to install this additional bracket for the housing. Bolts go in here to hold the oil seal cover. Dynamic. The housing is installed. Next I'll be installing the flywheel and the clutch, but first I'll put in the oil pump. Alright, so next I'll be installing the oil pan. I've washed, cleaned, and prepared the oil pan. The gaskets, we have our end gaskets, like these two rubber pieces, and the side ones are like these two pieces of Fahrenheit gaskets. Let's review to ensure everything's in order. The oil pump is in main bearings, and connecting rods are tightened, and everything is ready to install the oil pan. So I've installed and securely tightened the oil pan. The Fahrenheit gasket provides strong tension on the bolts. Unlike when you use a rubber or rubber cork gasket, there's no tension at all. It just flattens out, gets squeezed out, and that's it. My gasket should hold up more or less fine. Next, I installed this bracket here. This is our front mount, so the engine rests on these two supports. I installed the pulley, tightened it, and also put on the oil filter, not the filter itself, but the place where it attaches. That's it. So basically everything is assembled in this position. Now, what am I going to do now? I need to lay the engine on its side. So now I'm going to tilt it like this and start installing the cylinder head. Alright, so I laid the engine on its side. I've propped it up like this so it stands steadily. So now I can install the head, but before I do that, I want to release the valves and take a look. I'll explain why I want to release the valves. So there's information that when it was disassembled, either bolts washers or something else fell into these intake manifolds. But in general, I took a look visually and blew it out. It seems like there's nothing there, but it's still better to release and check to make sure the manifolds are empty and nothing is stuck anywhere, because the consequences could be quite bad later on. Very much so. So now I'm releasing the valves, checking them, and if everything is fine, put them down. Put everything back together and install the head. Alright, so I've released the valves and let's take a look. Basically we can see that everything here is fine. I didn't find any bolts or nuts here, and I'm not sure if there were any. It's not important, the main thing is we took it apart and checked it. Now I'll remove this carbon buildup, clean it, wipe it down, blow it out and start putting it back together. Alright, that's it. I've checked the head. The head is ready for installation. I'm installing it using the chain, putting the chain on, tightening the nuts. Alright, so I've prepared the bolts for installing the head. Now we take the gasket and we take these Teraplast rings. and throw them in the trash. And we'll install it on this type of gasket. A metal gasket. Basically, only these seem to work, at least a little bit. The metal asbestos one that I threw away doesn't hold at all. Not at all. You can't get anything out of it for a fee. So there's an instruction here. I'll take a picture and add the photo. So it's described very well and in detail how to install it, how to put the bolts in, the tightening torques and so on. So I installed all sorts of covers, plugs and so on, basically put in all the small stuff. And I want to say the following. Basically everything I can assemble on the table, everything I can assemble here in the workshop, I've already assembled, I've already done. Next, the engine is assembled on site. After installing the pushrod, the shaft, the rocker arms, the valve cover, the air manifold, all of that is installed there. The valves are adjusted. All of that is done on site. There's this particular feature of domestic automotive manufacturing, the assembled engine doesn't fit into the bus. Here we also install the compressor. Whether it will be a new or different one is still undecided, but currently it's unavailable. For now, I'll put a plug here since there won't be a compressor yet. I installed the starter, basically everything I could, everything I removed, I put back in place. well. So we see like this, it works basically pretty well for this engine. Well, let's see how long it lasts, how much it will run. I'll try to keep you updated on the future of this engine. If anything happens to it, I'll make subtitles on the channel and so on. But I think it will last at least 1100 or 1200. God willing, that will be in 2 years or even in 5. Alright, that's the video I ended up with. Thanks everyone for watching. Good luck to all. Goodbye.